Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate, Joe Mueller.
All right, loyal listeners of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. This is show number 8. Today we're going to have the CEO of RealtyMogul.com, Jilliene Helman, with an incredible interview discussing the opportunities in the crowdfunding space through the company she founded, RealtyMogul.com. We're going to dig into the difference between debt and equity opportunities, some of the risks involved, as well as the rates of return. This is a great episode for both experienced and newbie investors alike. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for tuning in.
Please take a moment to hear from our featured sponsors.
Today's episode is sponsored by Jordan Capital Finance, offering lucrative rates on fix and flip line of credit loans, as well as opportunities for buy and hold investors. Please visit tanisgroupllc.com/funding for more information. Pathway Financial offers 0% interest on unsecured lines of credit loans for all types of real estate investing. Please visit tanisgroupllc.com/funding for more information. Hi, Jilliene. Thanks for coming on the show today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe you could take a minute and tell our listeners, maybe give a brief description of what your business offers and what your role is in that company.
Sure thing. I am the CEO of RealtyMogul.com, an online marketplace for investors to invest in commercial real estate. We allow investors who are interested in getting exposure to the commercial real estate markets to find either commercial real estate funds or specific commercial real estate properties that they want to invest in by browsing on our online website.
So is everything you guys offer available through the website then?
It is. We put all of the investments that are available for investment up on our website, and individual investors can browse directly online.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Before we get more into that, can you just tell me how you got started, or maybe a little bit on what your history is in the real estate business or crowdfunding, or how you ended up at Realty Mogul?
Sure thing. I really started learning real estate around the dinner table. My mother was in luxury real estate, and my father owned real estate through his business ventures. So I was always fascinated about real estate, even from the time that I was a kid. And coming out of business school, I went to work in the banking sector. So really wanted to get a formal education in financial services and in banking. And then after I'd been there about 4.5 years, I left to launch Realty Mogul.
Oh, awesome. So this is a company you founded and launched yourself.
Correct.
That is incredible. I had no idea. So let's talk a little bit more about Realty Mogul then. Maybe explain to listeners what crowdfunding is if they don't have an idea yet.
Sure. I describe crowdfunding in its most simple sense as pooling capital together on the internet. So it's an opportunity for individual investors to invest together on the internet, potentially with people they know or with people that they don't know. And it allows for investors to invest lower minimums. Our minimum at Realty Mogul is $2,500. So by pooling capital from all of these individual investors, they can buy larger transactions.
Okay. What's required for an investor to get involved with Realty Mogul? When I say investor, I mean the people that are actually putting their money into that crowd fund.
So the first thing that they'll do is go on to RealtyMogul.com and sign up for an online account. There's no obligation. The online accounts are free. And then they can start browsing investment opportunities and determine which investments are the right fit for them.
Okay. And they can pick whichever ones they have an interest in?
Exactly. And then they can do the entire transaction process online. So they can sign legal documents online, they can fund online, and then as an investor, you also have access to an investor dashboard, so you can see how your transactions are performing.
Right. You can invest in multiple opportunities at once, correct?
Correct.
And then you've got a dashboard to check it out with. That's pretty cool. Going back to the original crowdfunding concept, what can an investor expect potentially as a return if they're going to put up, let's say, $2,500?
Yeah, it totally depends on the investment opportunity. We at Realty Mogul offer both equity opportunities and debt opportunities. So maybe just walking through the difference between those quickly, which will help on return expectations.
That would be great.
When you're investing in equity, you're in the riskiest portion of the transaction. When you're investing in debt, you're in a less risky place in the transaction. So if you think about risk and reward, theoretically, you should have more potential upside or more potential reward if you're investing in equity and less potential reward if you're investing in debt because it's not as risky as equity. So our returns are typically going to range. Well, first, let's talk doomsday, right? On the doomsday side of the world, you could get nothing. You could lose principal. You could lose money. I mean, there's a reason that there's real risk in any investment, real estate included. So if you go away from doomsday, we target investments that have a 6 to 7% cash on cash return. So you're going to generate that in cash flow. We're big believers in cash flow investing. Okay. Now, on some of our equity transactions, there may also be appreciation. So you might invest in a property that was acquired for $10 million, and maybe that property is sold for more than $10 million at some point in the future. And so you're going to get a portion of that appreciation if there is some. So when we're looking at appreciation for equity, we tend to target around a 15% internal rate of return. So you'll have cash flow in that 6 to 7% range, and then we target a 15% total return, but it can be widely different than that, right? I think a big part of the beauty of crowdfunding and online finance is that investors have access to a lot of information. So investors are going to want to dig deep and make sure that they understand all of the risks and all of the potential rewards of any transaction that they're investing in.
Of course. So let's use a different type of number then. Let's call it $100,000. I put $100,000 into Realty Mogul into, let's say, one opportunity that you're saying I can expect on average, but of course there's always the possibility of a doomsday. 6 to 7% cash on cash return annualized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So $6,000 to $7,000 over the course of 12 months. Is that paid monthly?
Paid either monthly or quarterly. On our loan transactions, we look to pay monthly, and on our equity transactions, we look to pay quarterly.
Awesome. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Sounds like that'd be a great way for a newer investor who's who's got the cash on hand but doesn't have the experience to locate and work with you guys in order to make either some money on the side or just get started in investing. So
also passive investors, investors who don't want to deal with the hassles of tenants and toilets and trash and really want to get exposure without doing a lot of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What type of analysis or due diligence is performed on the Realty Mogul side if an investor brings you a potential opportunity? And I want to clarify, when I say investor, obviously it's kind of like two terms there, right? We got the end investor who's doing the crowdfunding, and we've got the beginning investor who maybe has the commercial development, we'll call it, right? Or do you call it something else?
We'll usually call it investors on one side and then real estate companies on the other. So real estate companies are the folks who need financing, and the investors are the folks who are looking for passive income.
Okay, good. So I'm glad we clarified that. So when a real estate company brings you an opportunity, what type of analysis or due diligence is performed by Realty Mogul before it gets put onto the platform?
So our due diligence stems really around 4 key pillars. They say that in real estate, the most important thing is location, location, location. And while I totally agree that that is true, our first pillar is actually people, people, people. So who are the people that we're going to be involved with, right? What kind of experience do they have? Do they have experience in that local market? Do they have experience with that property type? We're really looking and focusing on the people that we're doing business with. So we run background checks, we run criminal checks, we run credit checks. We really get to know the folks that we're going to be working with and that are going to be operating the underlying real estate. Mm-hmm. The next step is location. So what are the demographics in the market? What is the population growth in the market? What are the key demographic trends that are happening in the market? Is there job creation? Is there, population growth? All of those types of things. Absolutely. Then we'll dig into the real estate itself. When was the property built? When was the roof last repaired? We'll also rely on the fourth piece of our diligence, which is third parties. So we'll look at appraisals. We'll look at property condition reports. We'll look at environmental reports if needed. And we're using all of that to give us a certain degree of comfort that this is a transaction that we'd like to move forward with and put on the platform.
Okay. That sounds awesome. I mean, that would be all the right things I would want to hear if I was going to put my money up with you guys. So it sounds like a good way, like we already said, to kind of get started or passively invest and put your faith in a company that's done all that background work to try to prevent, as much as humanly possible, any type of issue going wrong with that investment. If I'm an investor that wants to get involved with Realty Mogul, I know we talked about how the dashboard itself and the website has all the legal documentation and the requirements. Do you only work with like accredited investors, or is it anyone can just get involved that has enough money to put up the $2,500?
Yeah, so it depends on the transaction. Certain transactions are only open to accredited investors.
Okay.
And certain transactions will be open to all investors.
Okay. Well, simple. Okay, cool. All right. Is there any types of properties in the commercial realm that you're not getting involved in or you won't lend on?
We don't do a ton of hospitality. We do a lot of apartment, a lot of office, industrial, self-storage, retail. We don't do a ton of hotels.
Okay. And then what about area specific? Is it nationwide? Is it beyond the US or?
We're nationwide, US only, and we have 5 offices around the country. So we've got pretty good geographic coverage.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. Can you maybe, I know we kind of touched on the 100,000 at like a 6 to 7% cash on cash return and then a 15% overall return on dollar amount. I guess one of the things I like to do on the podcast is kind of give a more specific example of something. Is that something we could talk about that you might be able to bring to the table? Is, elaborate on an actual example of something that you guys have funded and maybe closed upon so the listeners can get an idea of the real deal on one of these opportunities?
Every transaction is slightly different, right? So again, I want to stress the importance of investors doing their own due diligence and making sure that they're comfortable with the transaction. Mm-hmm. But we have had a number of transactions go full cycle where we've acquired the property, the real estate company that we partnered with has operated that property and then looked to resell that property. One most recently was in Illinois, where we partnered with a real estate company who's done over $1 billion in transaction volume. They acquired a set of industrial properties. We were an investor on 2 of the properties, and it was originally intended to be quite a longer term hold. They were looking to hold them between 3 and 5 years. And they ended up being able to do a bulk sale and had fantastic returns for investors, north of 20% returns on both of these transactions. Wow. Although, again, that's one specific scenario, right? And I always want to make sure with investors that we're straight shooters. So that's not always going to be the case. It was one sort of great example and one great transaction that we're really proud of, though.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good home run. I like it.
Yeah.
I understand it's probably not as, as you're describing, it's not going to be a common occurrence, but sometimes, with the luck of the draw, things can go a different direction and everyone makes more money. So no fault in that. It sounds awesome.
Right.
All right. If we could maybe just talk a little bit. I have a question I ask it for every guest on the podcast. And this is just based on your opinion or your experience with real estate over the years. If you could maybe name a common pitfall or an unexpected problem that you think real estate investors should be aware of, or maybe something you've experienced yourself that you can, kind of elaborate on that would bring to light something they could look for in the future to protect themselves?
I think my answer to this is probably the same for all investing, whether it's real estate investing or stock investing or bond investing, and it's irrational exuberance. Right. And what I mean by that is markets are cyclical, right? Stock markets are cyclical. Economic markets are cyclical. Real estate markets are cyclical. One of my favorite quotes is a Warren Buffett quote that is, be fearful when others are greedy. And it's this idea of, don't get sucked into the irrational exuberance. You don't want to be chasing a market. You want to be in a market that doesn't need to be chased, right? Again, it's this concept of knowing when enough is enough, knowing when the right time is to be in the markets or out of the markets. And one of the things I love about real estate is it's a very long-term play, right? It's not like the stock market. We're going to be day trading in and out. So in real estate, the single most important factor in my mind is staying power. The idea that you can buy a property and you can hold on, the idea that it is an illiquid investment and you're not going to go investing with dinner table money. I think that irrational exuberance in all investing is the one piece of advice I would urge folks to steer clear of.
Sure. No, I love it. And I love that quote. Be fearful when others are greedy, because that is totally the 100% truth. I want to ask real quickly, too, we didn't really touch on the price points of some of these opportunities that Realty Mogul offers. And I know we talked about what an investor, the minimum potential investment could be, and then how you've got a minimum amount that an investor can bring in depending on the deal itself. But what type of numbers are you guys doing on, some of these commercial deals? Like when you're financing one of these real estate companies, is it into the $1 billion range, or what are you guys playing more in a, less than $1 million field, or these major developments?
It really depends on the transaction. And investors, again, have the ability to sort of pick and choose what kind of transactions they want to be involved in. We've worked on transactions where we're investing $1 million or, in a $5 million deal or a $6 million deal. Okay. We've also worked on transactions where we're investing in a $50 million deal, right? Okay. And we're just one piece of the capital that is going into that project. So it can range pretty widely. We're not a company that's going to do a $100 or $200 or $300 million deal. That's just not our bread and butter, because we have a fundamental belief of think small to go big. And what we mean by that is there's this huge void in the market of available and readily available capital for smaller transactions, right? The larger transactions, you've got a lot of the really big funds, you've got a lot of private equity funds, you've got foreign capital that's coming in, and there's less competition in the smaller transactions. And what we like about that is we think that in many respects you can find better transactions, right? If there's less competition, you don't have as much price wars and price bidding and all of that. So we tend to focus on smaller transactions, but I'd say the transaction size is going to range from approximately 5 million, to 50 million.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's exactly what I was wondering about. If a real estate company had an opportunity that they wanted to present to you guys, what's the route that they would need to take to get in front of you or in front of your team to get, be evaluated by Realty Mogul?
They can do an online application directly at realtymogul.com.
Okay. So it all starts with the website. Starts
Correct.
And ends with the website. Okay.
Correct.
Is condition a factor with any of these properties that you guys, you're doing ground up development and then you're probably doing some type of, like you mentioned, multifamily, for example. 100-unit apartment buildings in San Francisco. Are you doing, rehab and rehabilitation of those types of opportunities or just development type opportunities?
So our bread and butter is actually cash flowing assets.
Okay.
We don't do a lot of ground up development. We've actually never done a straight ground up development because we really believe in the power of cash flow. So the power of compounding cash flow, the ability to get a distribution to investors in short order or,
Okay.
in attempt in short order. So where we're looking at the majority of our transactions is in commercial real estate that has cash flow with some value add opportunity.
Okay.
So a real estate company can go in, they can do some renovations, they can do some lease up, but they're not building these properties from scratch, not from the ground up.
Okay, good. Like I said, with the condition being a factor, are you taking vacant, ready to be knocked down type buildings and redeveloping them? Not from the ground up, obviously, but I guess my question is if somebody's got an opportunity, are there any limitations on what they can expect if they were to present something to you on the website?
Yeah, we've done heavy value add transaction and we've also done light value add transaction. So if you've got a heavy value add transaction, maybe you're turning the whole building, which means maybe you are going to renovate every unit in the whole building and put in new tenants. We've done things like that. We've also done things where say you have a 200 unit building and you're only going to renovate 50 of the units, for example. So maybe you're renovating a quarter of the building. We've looked at transactions like that as well.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Jilliene, can you tell me the best thing that you can offer to the group and why they should consider working with you guys in the future?
Yeah, a lot of people talk about crowdfunding for real estate as democratization of access to capital. So the idea that, real estate companies can get capital from a broad base of investors. And I actually view it slightly differently. I view crowdfunding as the democratization of access to deal flow. So giving investors who wouldn't otherwise have access to this deal flow, direct access to this deal flow on the internet. And for investors who either don't have exposure to commercial real estate or don't understand commercial real estate enough to go acquire their own property or don't have the dollars to be able to go acquire a building on their own, I think Realty Mogul is a great place to get started, first and foremost in educating yourself, right? We have over 400 blog posts that are all centered around real estate education.
Wow.
And then beyond education, dipping your toe in the water, right? And dipping your toe in the water in a way that is passive, a way that's not going to take up a tremendous amount of your time, a way that's going to be easy for you to start getting exposure to commercial real estate. Because making that first investment is always the toughest, right? I remember thinking back in starting our company, and it was kind of like taking that first step is so hard, right? Quitting my job and taking this step and saying, I'm launching this company and I'm running it and I'm going to build it. That's hard. It's scary. It's challenging. And making your first investment in commercial real estate is similar, right? It can be very, very scary. So I think that one of the benefits of crowdfunding in a platform like Realty Mogul is that you can really dip your toe in the water.
And based on what we've talked about today, what would kind of differentiate you guys between some of the other companies that are out there right now that are offering similar type platforms?
I think our product is differentiated. So as I mentioned earlier, we really focus on cash flow. We don't do any ground up development, and we really focus on commercial real estate. We don't do any residential real estate, limited residential real estate, but it's, our focus is commercial cash flowing real estate, and that's where we spend the majority of our time, which is quite different than some of the other platforms.
Okay, great. One of the questions I always ask our guests is there any type of podcast or maybe a YouTube video, any type of educational platform that you could recommend or a book you've enjoyed that is related to real estate that you could talk about real quick?
I hate to be self-serving, but I love our blog.
Okay. No, I thought that was cool when you mentioned it.
I love the Realty Mogul blog because I've written a lot of the articles, and we've written it to to hopefully appeal to an audience of both new investors and also sophisticated investors. There's a lot of sophisticated content, but there's also some simple content. We're actually just about to put up 40 new educational videos as well. So for people who, want quick 1 to 2 minute snippets of explaining real estate concepts, what is cash on cash, what is IRR, what is the capital stack, all of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
We've hopefully made that very digestible.
And I think that's incredible, honestly, because there's a lot of educational platforms out there right now. And this is why I asked that question. And to have you guys offer not only maybe some of the more simple and basic stuff down to simple terminology all the way through, the more sophisticated information that an investor needs to get involved, I think is incredible. So I want to stress that to the listeners is, check out realtymogul.com, maybe check out their blog and see what type of, educational information you can draw from that, all for the cost of, a broadband connection, which everyone has. So that's awesome.
There you go.
Great. Is there anything else you want to add before we kind of close this up?
I think that's it.
Okay, great. What's the best way for the audience to get a hold of you or someone at Realty Mogul should they have any more questions? Or is it just the website, or do you want to give out any type of contact of anyone?
Best place to go is realtymogul.com. And if you have a specific question, you can always email help@realtymogul.com.
All right, Jilliene, I really appreciate you being on the show today. It was a great opportunity, and I actually learned a lot from this just for myself. I'm going to go check out the website again myself, and I'm going to check that blog out for sure. So I just want to extend my appreciation for taking the time today to meet with me and record the podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or tennisgrouprealty.com.